How's it going, everyone? Matt from Backer Club here again with another creator interview. This time we have Holden from SparkBlocks. How's it going, Holden?
Pretty great, Matt. Thanks for your time, and I'm happy to share SparkBlocks with the world.
Awesome. Yeah, we're excited to hear a lot about it. So, just to jump right into the questions here, for someone that's brand new to SparkBlocks, can you give us a brief overview of the project?
Of course, yeah. So SparkBlocks are electronic building blocks that click right onto the plastic building bricks that you already have. So these are like Lego or similar systems that have studs on top and tubes on bottom. But we're basically combining the playability of the bricks with real electronic circuits and components so that kind of the STEM skills and the circuit learning happens in the background, and you can, learn all of the real components that we use, but you're also just bringing your existing creations to life.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great that it's like a completely modular system that you can use with stuff you already have. I think that's a really key component there so that people don't have to buy a whole new system of like Legos. I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and he absolutely loves Legos. And so like, we have so many already as it currently is, and so we don't have to have to buy a whole new system of Legos. So I think that's great.
100%. And that's part of actually what I love about the system is it can actually like reinvigorate and bring back to life sometimes that dusty box of bricks that you have, or it can certainly help like transform some of the sets you have by adding motors, sounds, lights, switches, sensors, and more.
So where did the inspiration for Spark Blocks come from?
Well, it started with my partner, Mark. My co founder, Mark, was sitting around during the pandemic and actually searching for some kind of more inclusive, gender neutral STEM learning tools that would get both boys and girls of every interest area kind of excited about learning electronics. And he couldn't find much. Some of the systems were super basic, and you'd kind of click together the parts and follow the guide, and then you'd be done. And you'd do the kind of boring experiments, and there's nothing left to inspire you or to let you keep building. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have like breadboards and soldering with lots of loose wires and components that are fragile. And really, those were almost too limitless, and they were hard to get started on, both for students, young kids, as well as the parents who might not be familiar with them. And so there was like this missing middle where he said, we can use things that people love already and that people are very creative with to actually teach the fundamental concepts of circuitry. And so that's where he had the idea. He was looking around. He said, "Well, these are a great building system with limitless possibilities. Let's use that as the base." And so, over the last few years, he's developed them. We filed patents in North America, Europe, and Asia in a couple different jurisdictions. And we think we have a sufficiently unique technique of teaching the loop of a circuit compared with what other folks have done. And so, yeah, we've been iterating on prototypes. With my background as a mechanical engineer who's also done some electrical systems work, we're just kind of improving, what the prototypes are able to do, the durability, and we're really trying to lead with safety and quality and then fun. And yeah, we're really excited to enter production for our Kickstarter backers this fall.
Yeah, I was gonna say you kind of touched on it a little bit. We had a previous campaign that had a toy for kids, and he was talking about all the regulations that go into actually producing like kind of a kid's toy. And so we know a little bit about this and how, it's actually quite difficult, even down to the packaging and all the little pieces and everything have to be like looked at extremely closely. And so when you say safety, like, I think that's really what you kind of mean. And, so
Yeah, 100%. We're working with one of the best testing agencies, a global leader called KEMA. They're leading us through this litany of, I won't say hundreds of tests or
yeah.
thousands, but there's certainly a lot.
Yep.
It starts with the material usage. We're both from a quality of play angle, but also a safety angle. We're using the best materials available. That's generally ABS plastics, and then getting inside our bricks, we have circuit boards inside every brick, and those have real gold-plated conductive spring pins and real components, and they're soldered, and the solder and all the components have to be RoHS compliant, and then kind of zooming out to the package itself, like that has to pass toy standards as well. So there's ASTM F963, and there's the EU ones, and so there's all sorts of stuff. And then on the outside of every brick, I don't know if you can see on this, but this is a push button switch, and it just shows kind of momentary connectivity. Well, it's printed on one side with pad printing, on the other side it has words. One side schematic, the other words. That all has to be food safe because kids are going to lick it as well, right? So there's
Oh,
a lot of things to consider here in safety, and so we're doing a staggered test system where we have one injection mold cut, and we have actually almost 50 parts eventually that we're going to be shipping as
wow.
this first batch. And so our first parts are already in production and getting tested while we're just starting to cut some of the other molds in case there's any changes we need to make along the way from the test results. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
think
it's a lot.
it's crazy. It is. Yeah, I just don't think people will realize like how much goes into it. So, with that being said, is SparkBlocks just for kids?
No way, definitely not. My when I got involved last year, my 5-year old just couldn't stop playing with it and loved it. But I will say, he didn't fully grasp what the learning opportunities were with it. He had fun clicking bricks together and bringing things to life, but he wasn't using words like series and parallel circuits. He wasn't using words like polarity. He'd use plus and minus, right? So some of these learning concepts were a little above him. That said, other 5 and 6 year olds are loving it. And, a lot of adults we found on Kickstarter is just buying it for themselves. They're so excited to kind of re engage and to re wake up that lively bit of play that a lot of us lose and that is really actually important for our mental health. So, we like to say it's good for ages 5 to 105. But when we work with educational experts and actually when we do our own kind of family learning sessions and school sessions, we find the sweet spot is like 8 to 12 years old. Yeah.
So, how long have you guys been working on SparkBlocks?
Well, I'll give all the credit to Mark here. He's been doing it kind of since 2022, I think, so a couple of years. And then I just got involved last year when I saw it as an invention. He said, "I've got this great invention." I said, "No, no, this is not an invention. Like this is a real product that just needs a little bit of reformulation and branding and a little bit more creativity to bring it to life." So yeah, it's been a labor of love, and now we're just doing all those tweaks to get it really ready for prime time.
Awesome. So now you basically touched on it a little bit, but can you talk about any environmental sustainability aspects of the project?
Yeah, so this is a really tough one for us. We're both environmentalists, and we are doing as much as we possibly can at this moment to make these, which are, in basic, they're a plastic toy. And we all know that, microplastics and plastic in general is a huge problem for our environment. And the reality is that as we're just starting out, it's really hard to embrace some of the more advanced sustainable materials along the way. So there are some recycled plastics available, but to do them with the quality of builds that you see Lego or some other folks just starting to do now after 70 years of work is really price prohibitive for us. And so we're working as aggressively as we can towards it. But I think you'll notice if you look at some of the either plastic toys or other objects that are made of recycled material, you'll notice they're very low quality in their fit and finish, and that's intentional. So again, we're working on it, and if you have ideas, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to work with you because it is one of our top priorities. But I guess what it comes down to at the end of the day is our environmental impact is that we're not making a single use product. We're making an entire system of learning that builds and grows with you. So these most basic bricks that are just an LED will be still valuable to you and your family or your classroom years from now when you're actually using our programmable robotic systems that we're just developing now, right? That are not out yet. That these same bricks will be part of that solution. Yeah.
That's awesome that you guys are going to continue on with it, to hear that you are going to continue on with the project. And I mean, even just sheerly the fact that you don't have to buy a whole new set. You can use your already existing base set of Lego or other type of modular brick, I think is a big sustainability aspect as well. So I'm
Yeah,
glad to hear it.
totally. Totally. And like I said, we're trying to improve all the time. And I'm pretty excited about what we can do these days in modern manufacturing. So I don't think it'll be long for some of those other areas.
Awesome. So I know you touched on it a little bit already, but can you give us a brief overview of the team and our partners for the project? Like how many people are working on this with you guys?
Yeah, I would say it's all in all pretty tight for a project this ambitious. So, Mark and I are the co-founders of SparkBlocks, and then we've used just a few consultants here and there to help us along on our way. And some of those are maybe more core consultants that are designing like our marble lifter or our walking ant that has six legs, and some of these theme builds that are a little more that require like a little more experience in building themed and beautiful workable Lego sets or building brick sets. And then, we've worked with a designer on Fiverr to get a nice friendly logo and that kind of thing, which I think is pretty common. And then certainly along the way, we've worked with a few folks who are more familiar with crowdfunding as a way to kind of get your first production run launched. And I have to shout out Launch Boom has been super helpful to us in that regard along the way. So yeah, it's a pretty tight team. We're very fast, and we work with a number of different manufacturing partners based on each of their specialties to bring together the finished product.
Yeah, nice, tight, keep the costs low so that you can pass that savings along to the people. Love it.
Oh, for sure.
So, with all the ways to launch a new idea, why'd you guys choose Kickstarter?
Yeah, well, this is a little bit of my sweet spot. So over the last 10 years, after finishing kind of my engineering career, I've gone into early stage growth strategy and finance for startups. And so this is an area I have some familiarity with, and I've certainly helped a number of different teams with their fundraises from venture capitalists or just angels. And something I'm recognizing in the environment here in Canada, as well as a little bit globally, is there's this like suction towards software eating the world, and the growth rates of software and the return rates are so fast that I feel like, launching a hardware product and fundraising for it is a little bit difficult when you can't promise, infinite returns
Yeah.
in, inverse infinite timelines. And so we've basically said like we think we can get through this trough period with just bootstrapping the two of us, and there may be some growth capital required later, but we're going to just look into that after we kind of get our first production run and deliveries under us, because then we won't have to give away as much of our company. And the day you agree to take outside capital is the day you're agreeing to sell your company away, and those investors are seeking their money back and their returns. And so the longer we can put that off, the better for us, not just in a financial way, but in a way to maintain our vision of this system of learning that we're building. So it's an intentional decision, and we're pretty happy with it so far. And thankfully, the community response has been very strong to SparkBlocks on Kickstarter.
Awesome. Yeah, glad to hear it. Sounds really great to me. So, what was the hardest part of the campaign so far?
It's a great question. I won't say there's been a terribly hard part. I think there's a lot of questions that arise about, how you're spending the little bit of advertising money that you have and why it's not as effective as you want it to be, and which visual ads you run, and a lot of those questions have been really new for me. As a more technical person, and Mark as well. So that's been a little bit kind of curious for us. But really, I think we've in some ways we've done the easy part now of making the promises, and it's time to now deliver on promises. And so I think the hardest parts may be ahead of us, but I have to balance that out with the fact that I have put products into production before, and so I know what's coming. I'm not going to be blindsided, and I've built in buffer to our schedule, so I think we can actually deliver it this year, even though that's very aggressive. And as a first time Kickstarter creator, I may be equally surprised, like a lot of folks are. But I think honestly, we've portrayed what we have in prototype form more or less. We're being very transparent about that, and now we're launching into production. And production of high quantities is very hard, especially when you're trying to make a really high quality dialed in product. So we'll see what we get up to this fall, but I think that'll be the tough part for us rather than the Kickstarter.
Interesting. Yeah, that's what we were gonna jump right into was how confident were you guys in the December delivery date? I think, you basically touched on this idea that you're really shooting for it, but I did notice that it is kind of I don't want to say a longer time horizon, but you're your campaign is almost getting to the very end, and so you guys still have like what about 6 months from now to actually produce it. And so like I think you guys gave yourself plenty of time, but you always never know with when you don't control the manufacturing, you don't control the design, and so like it's really hard to get all that in order.
Yeah, I mean it's every journey towards manufacturing is a little bit different, and I could say a few things about that. The first is that some campaigns you see are selling like a single product. Like this is a new kind of pen. This is a new umbrella. This is whatever it's going to be. This is a new camping chair, and maybe that product, that singular product, has a few different parts in it. And basically, what you're selling is multiple copies of that. Buy two chairs and get a deal. Buy four chairs and get a deal. Unfortunately, we're not in that camp. We're in a camp that is selling multiple kits. So we have our intro to circuits kit, then we have an advanced circuits kit, and then we have a classroom kit. Those are somewhat similar, but there are 50 unique parts that we need to put into
Wow.
production with hundreds of subparts, right? So that in itself is something. And then we have our add-ons. So I've mentioned like we have an ant that walks, we have a fully functioning fire truck, we have a patrol car, we have these Mighty Machines kit that has a candy dispenser and a windmill and a marble lifter. So we've got to manage all these different sets and SKUs between our different backer levels. And that is an area that I think is going to cause us some more headaches than other folks who are simply
Yeah.
creating a new kind of pen, right? So I'm being realistic about that. And so, yeah, we're excited for the journey and we'll see what we get up to. Like I said, we've built in some slack and we're going to do our best to deliver to our schedule. There's the smallest of chances we deliver early, but I have to also just admit, as a Kickstarter backer of many dozens of projects, I realize that credible people who have a vision for a high quality product, they invariably run into new challenges that they didn't know about. And as you mentioned, some of these are totally out of our control, right? Like there's the whole question of how long a container sits in a port before either it gets unloaded from a ship or your pallet comes out of it, right? And so as much as we want to prepare for that, we've built in 2 months on the ocean. We know that's a very generous amount of time, but there are these things that come up that
Definitely.
I've run into when importing parts before. So, we're doing our best to work with a global fulfillment partner. So we've got this nice strategy that allows us to have regional fulfillment warehouses so that parts aren't zigzagging across the globe. They kind of take the shortest path to you, and that's great for our backers because it saves them delivery and shipping fees, but it's also great for the environment in terms of fuel consumption. So hopefully we're gonna get back some of our time in these areas we've built in buffer, but yeah, we'll just have to see how it goes.
Yeah. I kind of have a bonus question from something you said. These things, these kits have sometimes up to 50 pieces, 50 individual pieces. I have to ask, which piece do you think or is the hardest to produce?
I guess, because we've broken things down into such modular components, a lot of our pieces are fairly simple. So maybe our most simple is just a connective wire. The circuit diagram is simply a line. We say wire on the back. So when you pull this apart, there are four unique pieces here and then a pad printing step. So that's five things that have to happen to our simplest part. Actually, and there's subcomponents in some of those, so there's more. But so I'm less worried about that, and maybe the one that I have the most questions about is this battery. So this is a USB-C rechargeable battery, and there's just a lot of parts packed into a small unit. So we've got our power pins that send out positive and negative voltage, and then and those sit on a circuit board, and then we've got a power control module kind of that's the safety system, and that's off the shelf from someone else. That helps you understand, well, if you put a short circuit right on the battery, everything's going to be fine. Like if a kid just puts his dinner fork right across this, everything's going to be fine. The battery takes care of it. It also helps control the overcharging and everything else. But all that said, like, first of all, it's an injection molded part. We're going to be looking for things like sync and warp and all those aesthetic things, and they're also functional in our case, so pieces,
Yeah.
and then we're juggling the electronics of it. So yeah, if I had to say the hardest part, let's say the battery.
Yeah, that but I think it's great that you kind of went into this like level of detail because I think people don't when they pick up a little Lego block battery like that, they don't realize how many things go into these little pieces. Like, it's
Yeah,
incredibly
it literally
neat
just
how it
clicks
works
on,
and you
right?
know,
But there is a lot happening in there, right?
yeah,
There's charge controllers,
exactly.
there's, resistors inside our LED so it doesn't burn up and all that.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So yeah, last but not least, coming back to the questions here, is there anything that you'd like to say directly to the backers?
Thank you so much for your support. We are thrilled to launch this system of learning. This is just our first foray, and keep an eye out for our future products. And I hope in the meantime, you guys and gals can learn something and have fun while engaging with SparkBlocks.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Holden. That's it, everyone. Holden from SparkBlocks. Thanks a lot for your
Good
time.
day.